The Trinitarian explanation for Mark 10:18 just simply doesn't work. Now let's read Mark 10:17 through 18. It says, "And as he was going out onto the road, a man ran up to him and knelt before him and asked him, 'Good teacher, what must I do to inherit life in the age to come?' And Jesus said to him, 'Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone.'" And he goes on to talk about the commandments. But firstly, I just want to point out that this really, really clearly teaches Unitarianism on two fronts. First, Jesus distinguishes himself from God. No one is good except God alone. And secondly, he says, "Why do you call me good?" He sees himself as someone lesser than God. So if a Trinitarian walks away from Matthew 10:18 still concluding that Jesus is equal with God and he is the same person as God, or he is God, he's the same being or essence as God, then we're mistaking Jesus on two fronts. He sees himself as someone lesser than God and someone different from God. So I really think the Trinitarian explanation falls short. So if I was to add on the explanation of the verse at the end, it would be something like this. "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. Therefore think about it. By you calling me good, you're calling me God too." Now I think this is a huge misinterpretation of what Jesus said, and here's why. Suppose my friend walks up to me and he's like, "Johnny, you're a good basketball player." And I say, "Why do you call me good? No one's good except Michael Jordan." My friend is not going to walk away from that thinking, "Okay, so you really want me to know that since I called you good and only Michael Jordan's good, that therefore I think that you are Michael Jordan." No, my friend would never walk away concluding that. He would know, "Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. You're not good compared to Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is in a whole nother class than you." But yet this is the exact same thing Trinitarians are wanting us to conclude here. And it's really important to note that the Jew believes that God is one, that there's one God, Yahweh, alone. Isaiah 44:6, Deuteronomy 6:4, all of those scriptures that he repeats on a daily basis teach that God is alone. So when he's talking to this human standing right before him, his preconceived notion is not that that human is God. That's his preconceived notion walking into the conversation with Jesus. So when Jesus seems to talk about God as a separate person, the Jew is never going to conclude, "Oh, I really am supposed to understand that you are God as well." No, he's walking into the conversation knowing that God and this good teacher standing before him are two different people. In the same way, my friend going into that conversation is going to know that Michael Jordan is different from Johnny. Those are two different people. That's how he understands reality going into the conversation. So how crazy would it be for my friend to conclude that I really am Michael Jordan, that that's what he's supposed to get from that statement? If I say, "No, don't call me, why do you call me good? Nobody's good except Michael Jordan alone." Do you really think that he's going to walk away from that conversation thinking that I am Michael Jordan and that I'm just as good as Michael Jordan? That's not going to happen in a million years, especially given the framework and the frame of mind that he's walking into the conversation with. So I'm asking you, as Trinitarians, why would you interpret it that way? Do we really think that Jesus here was secretly intending the rich young ruler to believe that Jesus really is the only God? The same Jesus who said, "I'm ascending to my God and to your God." The same Jesus who said, "My Father is greater than I." The same Jesus who said, "Worship the Lord your God and serve him only." The same Jesus who said, "I am the Son of God." He didn't say, "I am God." And the same Jesus who said, "For God said, honor your father and mother." Not that he said that. God said, "Honor your father and mother." Jesus spoke all of these things. So the same Jesus that consistently sees himself as someone different from God, we really think that he's secretly intending this rich young ruler to understand that he really was God and that this is a matter of salvation, eternal salvation, that this rich young ruler reflects on that and concludes that Jesus really just is God. Now, let me address a logical argument that Trinitarians put forward that's derived from Mark 10:18. So the logic would be summarized like this. Jesus claims only God is good. They get that from Mark 10:18. Jesus claims, premise two is that Jesus claims to be good. So he claims that God is good, only God is good, and then he claims to be good. They get that from John 10:11, that he's the good shepherd. The conclusion is that, boom, therefore Jesus claims to be God. Now, this does seem like an airtight logical argument, but let me throw another argument out there. Premise 1, Jesus claims only God is good, from Mark 10:18. Same first premise as the first logical argument. Premise 2, Barnabas is good. He's directly called a good man in Acts 11:24. Therefore, Barnabas is God. The logical argument is the exact same as the one for Jesus. This is the exact same logical argument. It stems from the same, very, very similar premises. It's just we're replacing Jesus for Barnabas. Now, clearly this doesn't work, right? Barnabas is not God. The problem lies with the first premise. The adjective good is not only applicable to God. So anything that gets called good anywhere in the Bible, we can't say, boom, that's God. It was called good, therefore it's God, because only God is good. No, there are a lot of verses that prove that simply can't work. There are many things in the Bible described as good, and they're not God. Certain people are called good in Matthew 12:35 and in Matthew 22:10. The servant in the parable is called good in Luke 19:17. Barnabas is called good, as I mentioned earlier, in Acts 11:24. Christians are supposed to be good stewards in 1 Peter 4:10. So we see that this word good is applied to a ton of different scenarios and people that aren't God. So they're getting that first premise wrong there. It's not that the adjective good can only be applied to God, and if you apply it to anything else, it becomes God. That simply doesn't work, because the servants become God. Barnabas becomes God. If you're going to use consistent logic there, that's what you have to conclude. You would have to conclude that Barnabas is also God. So, because good is applied to a lot of other things that are not God, we have to understand that Jesus' words mean that God is good in a class of his own. When it comes to goodness, he's in a class of his own. He's his own kind of good. There's nothing that can compare to the goodness of God. It's not that the word good is wrong when it's applied to anything else other than God. Like if I was to call a fruit good, I'm using good in the wrong sense, that it can only be applied to God. No, the word good can apply to tons of things, and it doesn't turn them into God. You could do the same thing with the word smart. Albert Einstein is smart, but in comparison to God, you could say, no, only God is smart. In the same way, it's like Jesus, yes, he is good, he's sinless, absolutely. But in comparison to God, no, don't call him good. God is in a class of goodness by himself. God is in a class of intelligence by himself. No one can compare in those qualities to God. So that's what Jesus is saying in Mark 10:18. He's saying that God is in a category of goodness that Jesus himself doesn't even fall into. He's saying, why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. When, as Jesus' followers, are we going to stop concluding, no, Jesus, you really are God and you really are just as good as God, and listen to him? Listen to Jesus' own words, who says, no, why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. When are we going to start listening to Jesus' words about how he views his relationship with the Father? I pray that you would consider that maybe the view you've been taught is not what Jesus himself believed.